Let's get talking now. Despite massive investments and privatization of the power sector, constant and adequate electricity supply has remained a serious challenge for Nigeria, just as the country's power sector witnessed another electricity system collapse, forcing households, manufacturers, and others into total darkness. This is not the first time the national grid will be collapsing, as the grid has failed electricity consumers more than 130 times since 2013 when the sector was privatized. Although the federal government claimed that it has solved the power outage being experienced across the country, but the electricity situation in the country has been in its worst moment since the past month, as generation capacity dropped to about 2,000 megawatts, with about 14 power plants shutting down. While the TCN blames pipeline vandalism and current energy crisis confronting some key sectors of the economy as contributory factors facing the power sector, the collapse of power supply each time it occurs comes with huge economic loss for consumers, especially commercial entities. To help us address this challenge and understand what this means, we are going to be joined by this industry player who is the Chief Executive Officer of Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chukwueluka Ume. It's good to see you, Dr. Chukwueluka. Good afternoon to you. Dr. Ume, can you hear me?
Yes, Tolu, I can hear you.
Oh, great, great.
And nice to be here again.
Beautiful. Now, do you think we can have a strong public buy of federal government's words from yesterday's issues leading to the power grid collapse have been attended to? Well, that's what they told us. Following the fate of blackouts 48 hours after initial investigation on the grid collapse. What do you think about this back and forth about the collapse and all of that?
You know, Tolu, it's sad to note that this week alone we've had two collapses of the grid. Just two in 1 week. This year we've had three now. And you know, like I tell you every year, I tell you the same thing. We're going to keep saying the same thing over and over and over. And until we make a fundamental change to the sector, nothing's going to change differently. It's very clear. Our value chain in the energy sector is broken. Our grid in its current configuration is weak and unstable. We have more load than we can power in the country. We have very low generation, and our network is outdated. So we are going to continue to see the grid collapse. And to make it even worse now, diesel is close to 800 naira a liter. What that means is people, companies, houses, factories that would typically be running on only diesel generators will be looking to connect to the grid. So the load on the network is going to get worse, and the grid will continue to collapse. This is a reality, and we cannot wish it away. Now, what the government just said that they fixed is a very temporary fix. It's like you have a huge gash on your body, and you take a band-aid and stick it over. It doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't solve the problem. Since 2013, of course, we've had conversations on what are the proceeds from this process. Of course, after privatization, reforms and innovation on grid and off-grid power solutions. But the ruling sentiment is that the poor state of maintenance and lack of will to overhaul the power infrastructure will make this blackouts last longer. Now, what do you think on the part of, from your end, discos and transmission companies? How do we begin to make more sense? We've talked about coming together on the table and discussing these issues. What are the quick wins?
You know, we've come to the table, we've discussed, there have been many focus groups, there have been many conferences, all kinds of interventions. To me, I keep saying the same thing. This is putting a band-aid on a big sore that continues to fester and grow even bigger. The only way you would start to see real wins in this sector is to complete the privatization. You need to have the government remove its hand from the sector and allow the private sector to drive the energy industry. There is no alternative in our current makeup as a country. There is no alternative. Anything that anyone tells you is just a wishful thinking. We continue to have the government make interventions. They are building some power plants under NNPC. They called in Siemens to help. When they called in Siemens to help, I said it wasn't going to work, and we're seeing it today. We are not energy independent. We don't have energy security in this country. Any little bump or spike in prices in oil sector affects us. Now you have a war in Ukraine. It's affecting the price of diesel here in Nigeria, all the way in Nigeria. Who gets to suffer at the end of the day? It's Nigerians, you and I. Every other normal Nigerian suffers. So until we complete the unbundling of the system, relax the policies guiding the system, and create an environment where people can actually invest and do real things, nothing's going to change.
Worrisome. You touched on that, and I want to follow up on that not so many people are asking questions around the president's speech that's talking about Siemens to assist Nigeria with power infrastructure. Of course, the ultimate aim is to boost supply. How does this feel the deficit of trust?
Nigerians are very forgiving as a people, and we also are so distracted with making our daily living that we don't see the bigger picture. Not many people understand the power sector. In fact, very few people understand the power sector. So, a lot of people, even in the sector, don't understand it. And this is part of our fundamental problem. So these speeches, when I listen to them, they're well-intentioned, but they don't solve the problem. Siemens was calling to help. Siemens is a manufacturing company that produces devices for the energy industry, transformers, gas turbines. Siemens is a wonderful company, extremely well-run company. However, they are here to sell their equipment. Allow them to do their business, which is sell equipment. For us to get our sector properly running, you need to have the investors who understand generation, who understand distribution, transmission, gas production, processing, and pipelines to do the work and support them. So any money that the government has to invest, let that money go to helping create this playing field, this economic backbone that we want to see. As a company, we borrow money in dollars, but in the power sector, your money, your income is in naira. How do you borrow money in dollars when the exchange rate was 160 naira to the dollar? Today, in the black market, it's over 570 naira to the dollar. How do you pay that loan back? This is where we need the government to focus on. Provide cheap loans in naira for people that want to invest to do the work. And we're not just talking about big companies, we're talking about very small companies to the large ones. Support them so they can actually make a difference in our energy industry.
Let's move on very quickly because the situation is getting worse. Scarcity of PMS, Jet A scarcity, that's talking about aviation fuel, and now there's blackouts. Now let's not look at the impact on businesses and of course households reeling in all of this stifling realities, because you touched on that, but let's now focus on them. What effect do you think this will have? I'm already seeing affecting profit and all of that. Manufacturers.
Tulu, I think I may have told you this before. I said, think about a country that exports timber and imports things as basic as toothpicks. If you produce toothpicks in Nigeria today using a diesel generator, you cannot compete with someone that imports it from another country and doubles their price. You can't compete. At the fundamental of production of manufacturing is energy. And because of our crazy energy prices in Nigeria today, you cannot compete in manufacturing. So this affects everything from the price of tomatoes to the price of processed rice. Okay? And unfortunately, the Nigerian people, their income has not increased to match the inflation that we're seeing. It hasn't increased to match the cost of diesel or the cost of PMS that we're seeing today. How then can the common man start to afford these products that are being made in Nigeria? They cannot. And then even the companies that are struggling to manufacture, how do you expect them to keep their doors open and continue to pay their staff salaries? It's becoming much worse by the day. And I think we understand the problems. It's time to start focusing on the solutions Stop looking for an expert to come and solve our problem. We already have some of these solutions right here. Some Nigerians are very smart and they're here and they can help to solve the problems if only they will be given the chance, if only they'll be listened to. We need to quit putting square pegs in round holes and vice versa. That's the only way we will start actually addressing the problem. There are a lot of smart people here. There are a lot of smart people working for the government today. Unfortunately, the smart ones, most of the smart ones are not being heard. They're not being listened to. So we're going to continue to see this vicious cycle. The grid will continue to collapse. Prices are going to continue to run away. Meanwhile, the income of people stays the same. We need to do something different.
In the news today, NERC is talking about a hike in tariff. Now, what sort of reaction do you think will follow any conversation around upward tariff adjustments at the moment? We celebrated Consumer Rights Day this week. So moving forward, the only justification for increased tariff is adequate and constant power supply. What's your reaction to this?
It's not automatic. You raise tariff. It's not automatic that you're immediately going to start seeing more power. It takes time to make investments in the sector. Gencos need to produce more. Today we have over 12,000 megawatts of installed capacity, but how much are we producing really? Every year we're still dancing around 4,000 megawatts. Sometime this week it dropped to about 2,000 megawatts. So Gencos and more, the existing Gencos need to invest money to produce more power. We need many more new Gencos. I keep saying, I think we need about 50,000 megawatts of installed capacity in Nigeria to even start. Then on the DISCO side, DISCOs need to invest more money in their networks, and increasing the tariff helps create more liquidity for the DISCOs to invest. But there's something in between. You still have the transition community of Nigeria. And today, I believe that reliably they can transmit about 5,500 megawatts of electricity. So you can fix the DISCOs, you can fix the Gencos, but in between, it's completely broken. So we need to fix that as well. I think we need to break up our large grid into smaller networks that are now interconnected to each other. You need money to make this investment. And when you see a hike in tariffs, that incentivizes more investors to come and put money into the system. However, without the right foundation, without the private sector driving this energy sector, this electricity sector in the country, this money that they will invest might end up being lost at the end of the day because of inconsistencies in policies, because of the runaway prices the runaway exchange rate that we have today. So there's an interconnection between every part of this value chain and between the electricity sector and our economy that is driving what we're seeing today.
Before I let you go, Dr. Ume, we hear the discourse also talk basically about liquidity issues. Many times they talk about liquidity, and you just talked about that they need to invest more. And they would say cost-reflective tariff will make them do better. And on the other side, the Gencos say they are being owed. We also have MDAs of government not even paying at times. I think there was a time there was a format to get those monies back to, to the power companies and to the DISCOs and all of that. All of this seems to be issues we also need to contend with.
Yeah. So, when we start seeing electricity as a commodity that is sold by private companies that are here to make a profit, then we will start having the right conversation. If a power trader or a DISCO sells electricity to an off-taker, and that off-taker doesn't pay, they will have the mechanism to stop supplying that commodity to that off-taker and to go after the off-taker to pay the money that he owes, whether it's a private company or a private home or a government entity. They will go after them to pay their money. That is the way to do proper business. And then, by the way, if the DISCO does not pay the Genco for the power that it supplies to it, then the Genco stops supplying to that DISCO or power trader and sells it somewhere else. This is what a proper market should look like. And that is where we start to solve the problem. Whatever the cost-reflective tariff will be at that point, let that number be determined by the people actually selling the product. And then the buyer of that product decides whether they want to buy or they don't, depending on the value that they're getting, whether they want to generate their own power by themselves or not. What we're seeing today, you have individuals, you have companies generating most of the power that they use with diesel generators. People are now jumping to the solar option. Now, these, in my opinion, are a small drop in the bucket, a small drop in the ocean for the solution that we need. We need a more holistic solution. And that holistic solution starts with complete the privatization of the power industry. Government step back, let this industry be run by professionals in the private sector, and just create regulations that will guide the way the whole sector works to make sure we're not damaging the environment or doing anything unethical in the country. This is where we need to get to if we're going to see a proper solution and a properly working power industry in this country, so the Nigerian people can actually get what they're paying for.
It's a good way to leave it. It's always interesting having a chat with you with regards to the power sector. As usual, the CEO, Century Power Generation Limited, Dr. Chukwu Eloka Ume. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Nice talking to you.